We're back with Father Mallon here in session 3. We're going to talk about forming a leadership team, which is a huge piece of becoming a missionary parish. How did you do it? What's it about?
Well, before we go to the how-to, let me just lay some principles here. I said, that the church is essentially hierarchical, which means essential to the church's nature is to be led by priests. So leadership is an essential part of priesthood. Vatican II said the priest has 3 tasks: to preach the word of God, to celebrate the sacraments, and to lead God's people. It's the prophetic, the priestly, and the kingly ministries. And yet, for myself and for most priests, we received very little training on how actually to do the sacraments. We received virtually no training on preaching and absolutely no training on leadership. What we were taught in the seminaries, they did an amazing job of teaching us to be theologians. That's what they did. And so many of us don't know what it is to lead. But in many ways in the past, we didn't really need leaders because if you were in a maintenance mode, and in the past when we lived in a kind of pseudo-Christian culture, the church didn't have to go anywhere. It could just sit there and people would come to it. It was one of those, if you build it, they will come. And really there was nothing, the script was written, you just had to repeat the script. So we didn't need leaders. Managers were able to make do. They sufficed. But today the culture has changed. Everything's changed. And if we stay where we are, and if we continue to do what we're doing, at best we're going to be managing decline. And guess what? It doesn't matter how well you manage decline. If you're dying, at the end you're going to be dead. And I believe the Lord wants the church to move to a place of health, because healthy things grow. And that means that leadership now is essential, because if we're going to move from maintenance to mission, the only way that can happen is not through management, but through leadership.
You make a good point. There was a time that Christendom existed in the West, right?
That's right.
And Christendom has collapsed.
That's right.
We know it. Europe, Canada, the United States is moving in the same direction. It's a whole new situation. It's more like an apostolic time. It's like the early church now. And so maintenance, as you're saying, cannot get it done. We've got to have a different paradigm and a different approach in order to reach the people we're called to reach, because the reason we exist is to go make disciples. So leaders need to be able to shift toward that and see the situation we're living in.
Exactly, because we're not in Jerusalem, we're not in Babylon, right? And so there's a couple of things about leadership. We really want a leadership that is able to bring about transformation. And if we get this right, the transformation will not just be within our churches. The very way in which leadership is done in the church will be transformed. Like I said, leadership is essential to the role of the priest, but the question of how is leadership exercised is key. And the other thing about leadership being transformed is that it will transform the leader. But a couple of principles. Number one, all transformation comes from the Holy Spirit. Secondly, we've got to have a proper anthropology, because sometimes people say, well, you sound very businesslike and this is not spiritual enough. And this is a false dichotomy. I quoted St. Augustine in an earlier video: pray as if everything depends on God and work as if everything depends on you, because we need to do both. Some people say, well, we just have to pray more and pray more and pray more. But that's a false starting point. See, grace builds on nature. It doesn't replace nature. We need to pray, and then we need to work. And if grace builds on nature, that means that we can employ the great insights of the business world and social sciences and all of the amazing writings that have been done on leadership. We don't have to be afraid of those kinds of things. The other thing, as we've already mentioned, that leading today in the church means leading change. There's no other way around it. And as soon as you lead change, people are going to get upset. So there's going to be pushback, and it's going to mean leading change. The task of the leader is to change culture. And that's a hard task. This is why it takes time. And I really believe that one of the things that immobilizes our church is the frequency in which we're moving pastors. 5, 6 years, we get a new pastor, and all that does is reset the button and put us right back to the start. It teaches people, just keep your head down, this guy will be gone soon enough, and everything go right back to the way it was before.
We're saying leadership needs to move toward changing culture. What are you talking about? What is the culture?
Yeah, culture, I don't mean ethnicity. By culture, I mean everything that we so often unconsciously believe to be the norm. The things that we celebrate, things that we tolerate. For instance, one of the things I do now when I give a talk, I often say, I want to show you a picture of my parish. And of course, everyone's expecting me to show them a building, and I have one of our Connect groups. I show them the people, and it's a shock thing. But that's a kind of a cultural way of thinking. The priority of adult faith formation as opposed to children. When you say catechetics, What do you mean in your parish by that? What do you presume that's going to be? What do you celebrate? What do you tolerate? Often is what shapes our culture. So to have a culture of evangelization and discipleship, and to have a missional culture, an invitational culture even within a culture of hospitality, these take time to implement because you're changing people's very perception of what is normal. That, oh, we used to think this was weird, now around here we consider this to be normal. That takes time. And what organizations and churches often fail to realize is that culture is hidden. It's like an iceberg. Think of an iceberg. 10% of the iceberg is above the water, 90% is below. And it's the stuff below the water line that floats the stuff on top. What's the stuff on top? It's our nice statements about our mission and our values and blah, 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 what we put on our website. And oftentimes they reflect aspirational values, the things we desire to be. What is the reality? Look at the actions. Look at how, in a parish, how do you spend your money? How do you spend your time? Parishes will say, well, evangelization is the number one priority. You don't have a director of evangelization. You're not putting any resources into evangelization. How can you say this is a priority to you? If you want to find out what your real values are, as you say in our own personal lives, look at your calendar and your credit card bill. It's the same in a church. Look at the budget and look at the calendar. Look at the events you have. That will tell you what your key values are. And the task of leadership is to change this, and it takes time.
The leadership function is so big, both in terms of the pastor, but his team and the team dimension you're talking about. Because I've done parish missions, many parishes across the country over the years. So many pastors have said to me, yeah, we spent the last year putting a mission statement together. And so you put the mission statement together, and it's on the wall. And then 3 years later, they say, it's still there, but we're actually the exact same way we always were. Yeah. And no changes actually happen. And I think that's an honest frustration. They say, we don't know what to do. How do you? And then a lot of guys end up saying, guess what? 90% of the people are just never going to change anyway. It's just not going to work. I mean, that's where guys end up getting, and they sort of give up and they become minimalistic.
That's right.
And they just shoot very low, and because they don't feel like real change is possible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we talked about earlier, real change is the engine of change is encounter with Jesus and people becoming missionary disciples, but allowing that to bubble up. I mean, right now in my parish, probably 60% of our parishioners have gone through Alpha. 60% of our ministry leaders have all done Alpha training. Our last, 3-4 times a year, we have a leadership summit with all of our ministry leads. We've got about 70, 80 ministries. And we had people praying over each other. We're at the point now where that's normal. Yeah. We did this 5 years ago. People would have called the cops on me. Now it's normal.
So the change agent, you said, look, you casted a vision. You said, we're going to be a parish that is missionary, that makes disciples. We understand who we are now. We define what a disciple is. And so you use this tool, this particular tool, Alpha, to help bring people to encounter Christ, to lead them to discipleship. And then you helped use that to help raise up leaders.
That's right, because Alpha is not just a tool for evangelization. It's not just the heart of our discipleship process, but it's also our leadership pipeline, because built into Alpha is this system where you bring a guest back to be on team to provide hospitality, and then out of those people you identify ones with capacity to help with a small group, to facilitate, and then from those who help to lead a small group, and then the next level is to possibly run an Alpha course itself. Then we can begin to multiply these things or to become a live speaker.
So it's a great place to teach people how to lead. It's a wonderful place for them to
come
grow
back for training.
And for you to discern the gifts that people have.
This is a key thing to have in developing a culture of leadership within a parish. Because if we want to expand, we want the impact of our ministry to be proportional. The key thing we have to get is leaders, because we are often in parish life, we have doers. I mean, even some paid lay people, I said they have a clerical model is because they do. And the idea is like, you sit back and I will do it. But who we need in ministry, whether you're ordained or lay, is people who see the giftedness in others and call that giftedness forth and empower people. So we have a thing at St. Benedict where we say, don't delegate tasks, delegate responsibility. Real responsibility. And that means if you're giving people responsibility, you also have to give them authority, which means just like in parenting, sometimes you have to watch people maybe not do things the way you do them or even make mistakes. If they're going to drive off the cliff, you step in. But for the most part, that's how you're going to grow a thing. And give people real leadership over their ministry. Like, don't do it as a favor, because often what happens, if someone decides to give up a ministry, they'll come back and say, here, Father, you can have it back now, I'm done. that's how you know that you've just delegated a task. If a person has true ownership of that ministry, they will have their own succession plan. They will develop their own vision of where this is going. They will develop their own team. And that's what we're trying to do with every single ministry at our parish.
Say a little bit more about your team and how your team is set up and what your team does right now. How's it functioning?
Well, we have multiple teams. We have a staff team, we have a senior leadership team, we have a clergy team, an operations team, a pastoral team. We've got every single staff member oversees teams of people. So there are many, many teams, but at the heart of what we're doing in terms of my role as pastor, we have what's called a senior leadership team. And this is a key thing. I'm really convinced that this is critical going forward, because for myself as a priest, if you're watching, if you're a priest or even a bishop, I think now that we're in Babylon, we've got to be truthful and say, we don't know what we're doing anymore. We really don't. We were trained for Jerusalem. We don't know what to do. And even when I arrived at St. Benedict Parish, I had a strong vision. I had a strong initial strategy because I'd been down this road before in previous parishes, but it worked, and it worked very quickly. And within 2.5 years, if you think of it, the analogy of sailing, I was further away from the shore I had ever been before. And at that point, I realized, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I don't have a clue. I don't know. I know where I want to go, but I don't know what the right thing to do is now.
I remember talking to you during some of that period. You say that very thing. I said, it's amazing what's happening. And I'm the guy casting the vision. I'm not sure where to go at this point.
Exactly. And so I experienced real isolation. And so here's the thing. There's no such thing as a well-rounded person, but there is a well-rounded team, because we've all got our strengths and weaknesses. The conventional wisdom was identify your weakness and work on strengthening the areas of weakness so you can be well-rounded. Well, I'd say forget that. Don't even bother. You can spend the rest of your life and you hardly get anywhere. Bring a team of people around you. Know what your strengths are, know what your weaknesses are, and bring people around you so that together you're a strong team. And this is the key thing about a senior leadership team. We follow the philosophy of Patrick Lencioni, who's a wonderful Catholic layman who's doing a lot of work in parish renewal. Check out amazingparish.com if you haven't done so already. But Pat's stuff on team health is phenomenal. It's a real gift to the church. And basically it says this, that a leadership team is 4 or 5 people. No more than that, really. Because if it gets too big, people don't say what they really think. And they can be staff, they can be lay people. People say, I don't have a paid staff, I don't have a big staff. It doesn't have to be a big staff. The key thing with this team is that you've got all the core quadrants of personality covered. You've got strategic, relational, influencing, and executing. Don't get a bunch of people who are just like you. It'll be a disaster. Second thing is, if there has to be total commitment to the vision. You've got to be committed to total agreement about where you're going, where you're headed. And that includes fidelity to the teachings of the church and all this, but even within the parish, our vision, the thing that makes us passionate, you've got to have people with the same passion, and you can't tolerate disagreement on that. Division on the vision, you can't handle it. Yeah. But when you come down to the next level about how are we going to get there, that's a question of strategy. And not only should you tolerate disagreement and conflict, you should welcome it, and you should actually seek it out. Because people definitely tend not to voice their disagreement. You go to meetings, why are they so boring? It's because no one says what they really think. They save what they really think for the water cooler afterwards. And people don't buy in because they've never been heard, and they've never been heard because they don't really say what they think. And so the goal of this leadership team is to have trust and vulnerability and love between the members so that people can truly say what they think. We have our leadership team meeting once a week, and it goes like for 3 hours at least. You might think, 3-hour meeting. It is the most fun, dynamic, life-giving, challenging 3 hours of my week. We have whiteboards. We put down what are the key tactical decisions that need to be made this week, and oftentimes I might go in with some hopes of outcomes, and by the time we hammer stuff around, I'm sometimes challenged. I'm not in a way that takes away my authority. No one wants my job, but it's, Peter, I have to say this, it's been the most life-giving thing in my role as a priest. And if you're here as a pastor and you're struggling, like that sense of, I don't know what to do, I don't know, I feel isolated in the decisions I have to make, read Pat's books, get a leadership team in place. It will change your ministry. It will really help you to be a better leader to be able to cast vision in a better way.
And you talk as well, and Pat does, about the importance of who becomes a member of that leadership team. You know, so in the church so often people say, well who volunteers? Who wants to be the volunteer to come into that? And so we end up having people who don't have the kind of gifts, the complementarity that you've been talking
Remember,
about.
you want the complementarity, unity in vision, and the person who is able to, if all you've got is a yes person who will never disagree with the priest, disaster. Sometimes priests and bishops gather people around them who just yes father, no father, 3 bags full father. That's a disaster as well. So you need those components, unity in vision, variety in gifts so that you're a well-rounded team, and the freedom to have healthy conflict. That's a key thing.
Very good. We're going to talk in the next section. This is really great, Father. Thanks for doing it. This was a loaded session. I really loved it. We're going to talk about transforming the culture a little bit more next time around. So friends, stay tuned.